This video is brought to you by The Perfect Gene. Go to theperfectgene.nyc/Dan15 for a special offer and stay tuned after the video for more info. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with a look at the future of the X-Men, which are going to be a cornerstone of Marvel across all different venues going forward. X-Men 97 just wrapped up on Disney+. We have some news finally about the live-action X-Men movie, which is coming up in the MCU. And we also have some pre-sale numbers for Deadpool and Wolverine, which is the only Marvel Studios movie that we're getting this year. So I decided to package that all together and sort of look forward at the franchise. And it's a franchise that's really been somewhat dormant since 2019, when the existing series of X-Men movies wrapped up with the extremely underwhelming Dark Phoenix. Let's start with Deadpool and Wolverine, which is the first X-Men related film in the MCU since Fox and Disney joined forces, and it's also one of the biggest summer releases, a real stress test for the MCU as a whole. Ticket pre-sales started this week, and things seem to be looking good so far, as multiple sources have reported that it has the highest ticket pre-sales for an R-rated film ever. According to Deadline's reporting, quote, "While there are no direct comps on Deadpool and Wolverine ticket sales in post-COVID history, its current cash bests the 24-hour advance ticket sales of Warner Bros. DC's The Batman, Disney Marvel Studios' Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and Lionsgate's R-rated John Wick Chapter 4. According to the CEO of AMC, Adam Aron, on X/Twitter, quote, "Some 200,000 movie fans have bought their AMC tickets already. This is more day one ticket sales at AMC than for any other R-rated movie ever." And then according to reporting done by The Hollywood Reporter, quote, "Online ticketing service Fandango, which services a majority of movie circuits, reported brisk first day sales for Deadpool and Wolverine, saying they were the best of 2024 to date, as well as a franchise best and the best for an R-rated feature." Pre-sales are certainly an indicator, but they can't be concretely projected out to determine what a movie's success will be, especially since we're 2 months out, basically, from the opening of Deadpool and Wolverine. Sometimes pre-sales are front-loaded. If you'll go back to the Eras Tour, some people, including myself, thought that the movie might open to $100 million, but it just turns out that the fans were super excited to get into those very first shows. However, let's look at some numbers based on Deadline's reporting about those first-day sales compared to the Batman and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which should share a similar audience with Deadpool and Wolverine. If we're looking at the opening weekend numbers, the Batman opened to just over $134 million back in 2022. Last year, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 opened to $118.4 million. So unless Deadpool and Wolverine is significantly more front-loaded in those first-day pre-sales than either one of those two movies, it's looking very likely that we're going to have at least a $100 million plus opener. And should Inside Out 2, which is really the leading contender before Deadpool and Wolverine comes out, fail to open to $100 million, it's also possible that Deadpool and Wolverine could be the first $100 million opener this year. That is a stat that we're tracking over on Charts with Dan, which is right here on the channel every week. Now, if Deadpool and Wolverine hits that Batman number, it could, and this is very early, but could break the original Deadpool's opening weekend record for an R-rated film, which was $132.4 million. That's still only the 42nd overall highest ever opening at the box office. But there's so much that we don't know about this movie yet. Obviously, the main one being reviews and fan reaction. There's something that I've been saying for a while now, which is that you can't track enthusiasm. When the experts are looking at things like pre-sales and what did this movie do, what did that movie do, the one thing that you can't track is if the movie's very well received, how enthusiastic people might be to go see it. So that number could go significantly higher than projected. Conversely, if the movie's not received well, then things like pre-sales kind of go out the window because that depresses audience turnout over the opening weekend. So this is by no means a solid indicator of where we're headed. Again, I think that it's likely that we're headed to an opening weekend of over $100 million. And I guess the biggest X factor of all, no pun intended, would be that R rating. I mentioned that Deadpool is the highest ever opening for an R-rated movie. That's still number 42 all time. So you're not going to draw those top 10 of all time numbers, you wouldn't think. But the other thing to keep in mind is that here in the US at least, the R rating isn't a restricted rating as far as attendance. It just means that if you're under 17, you have to be accompanied to the movie by a parent or guardian. So it's not like the movie is completely cut off from people that are under 17 years old, but that does tend to depress attendance a little bit because you can't have younger audiences going, by themselves, and maybe they don't necessarily want to go with their parents or whoever. While Deadpool and Wolverine doesn't have a massive overlap for the future X-Men live-action films, a huge hit featuring Wolverine and other characters from the X-Men universe could help keep that franchise relevant until the upcoming live-action MCU film. And there is finally some movement on that future movie. Reports emerged this week that writer Michael Leslie is in talks to write the film, and should those negotiations hold, that is a major step forward in bringing the X-Men to the live-action MCU. Now, as a feature screenwriter, Michael Leslie has a pretty limited resume thus far. He's only written 3 movies, none of them solo. He co-wrote 2015's Macbeth with Michael Fassbender, 2016's Assassin's Creed, also with Michael Fassbender, and last year's The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, not with Michael Fassbender. It should be noted that he had sole writing credit on 4 of 6 episodes of the acclaimed BBC miniseries The Little Drummer Girl. He also wrote an upcoming adaptation of Hamlet, starring Riz Ahmed, and he is credited as a writer on the upcoming Now You See Me 3, which should be called Now You See 3, but the second movie should also have been called Now You Don't. So the naming convention across those movies is completely out of whack, but that's not his fault. I've already seen some doom and gloom online, I know, shocking, about Michael Leslie's resume and the fact that it has some movies in there that are underwhelming, particularly Assassin's Creed, which isn't a movie I thought was very good. I thought it was a very dull film. But I think the important thing to keep in mind here is that just because a writer has written projects in the past that are underwhelming, that doesn't necessarily mean that things that they're going to be involved with in the future are going to be underwhelming. For example, Michael Green, the co-writer of Logan, previously co-wrote Green Lantern. Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely wrote Thor: The Dark World right before Captain America: The Winter Soldier and their other films with the Russo brothers. Chris McKenna and Eric Summers wrote Ant-Man and the Wasp, widely considered to be one of the most lackluster films in the MCU, but also wrote Spider-Man: No Way Home, one of the highest-grossing films ever in the MCU. And before Zack Stentz and Ashley Edward Miller wrote Thor and X-Men First Class, their only previous film credit was Agent Cody Banks. This isn't me saying that, oh, well, don't worry, the script for X-Men is going to be great. I'm just saying that it is way too premature to try to make any final judgments based solely on the resume of the writer. There are so many other pieces that haven't even fallen into place yet. We don't know what the direction of the film is going to be. We don't know who the director of the film is going to be. We don't even know who's going to be cast in the movie. I know that people want to jump to these conclusions and say, okay, well, this is how it's going to be, but we don't know how it's going to be yet. Yes, the other writers that I mentioned did have more extensive resumes, most of them, than Michael Leslie does coming into this project, but this has happened before where a writer seemingly comes out of nowhere and delivers a great script. And it's not like he's writing the script in a room alone. He's also going to be doing this in conjunction with the creative team at Marvel. Making Marvel and Leslie's job harder, though, is the ecstatic response to X-Men 97 on Disney+. I did a review here on the channel where I named it the best X-Men TV show or movie of all time. And there is some competition, some strong competition in that category. Some competition, not so strong, but there are a few really, really good X-Men movies. And then, of course, the original X-Men animated series. X-Men 97 is currently rated 99% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes with an 8.3 out of 10 average critic score and a 95% audience score. It's actually only generated 1 negative review out of 70 as of the time I'm recording this video. And going back and looking at the person who gave it a bad review, this critic also gave a bad review to Oppenheimer, which was a Best Picture winner and my personal favorite movie of last year, and has seemingly given a bad review to every other MCU project that he's reviewed in the past. So I think it could just be he doesn't really like Marvel movies and TV shows. And despite some analysis suggesting that X-Men 97 is a ratings disappointment, Disney released numbers suggesting that the audience grew as the finale approached and buzz began to build. I'll be tracking those numbers as the Nielsen reports come in over the next few weeks. I do a show called Streaming Charts where I look specifically at streaming shows and movies. The thing with Nielsen, though, is that there is a delay of about a month. So we're not really going to know if there was a huge spike in X-Men viewership for the finale until about a month from now when those numbers officially come in. There are other ways of measuring Samba and some other things that I think are useful as sign points and indicators, but I still put a lot of stock into Nielsen as far as overall data gathering. For Marvel, I think this is a mixed blessing. Obviously, it's great that they have, I think, their best reviewed series ever on Disney Plus, especially in the wake of several consecutive, really, series that have had mixed to negative reviews when there's a lot of scrutiny on the original programming that Marvel is making for Disney Plus. On the flip side of that, though, now I think that any live-action X-Men movie is going to be compared to X-Men 97. And if the movie should be underwhelming in some way, there's now a Disney-era version of the X-Men that fans can point at and go, well, look, why didn't you just do that? So it puts a lot of pressure on the creative team behind the live-action film. For X-Men 97, I think it's an irrefutable win, and production has already started on season 2, although there's no date as far as when that's actually going to hit the air or hit streaming. But there is one huge question mark, and that is the absence of showrunner Beau DeMayo, who was fired shortly before season 1 of the show premiered in a highly unusual move, both because of its proximity to the show airing and the mystery of why Beau DeMayo was let go. The timing was the thing that was really odd. There's partings and creative differences all the time in Hollywood, but the fact that they did it, I think less than a week or less than 2 weeks before the show premiered, you don't do that as a studio unless you really feel like your hand is forced, because all of the attention goes away from the hype and the premiere of the show to, wait a minute, what's going on behind the scenes? And if a studio can avoid that, they're going to. There has been a lot of speculation around what happened here, ranging from Disney didn't like the fact that Beau DeMayo had a non-explicit OnlyFans account to insider reports that he was difficult to work with creatively and the studio just couldn't put up with it anymore. We don't know, and that's also highly unusual. Usually the truth or some version of it comes out through insider reports, etc. Sources from either side are coming in and telling their side of the story. It's what we saw when Marvel parted ways with Victoria Alonso. We heard her side, we heard Disney's side, and it was all at least out in the open fairly quickly after it happened. But with Beau DeMayo, Disney hasn't really commented on what happened. For me, things got even more mysterious when I watched the Disney Plus X-Men 97 Assembled documentary this week. They're usually pretty in-depth looks at the production of MCU projects, but this making of doc focused mainly on the origins of the original X-Men animated series and then the reunion of the original voice cast. I think it was like a 57-minute long documentary. I'd say 50 of those 57 minutes were all voice cast and the original series, and there was very little about the actual production of X-Men 97. We learned about the animation, a little bit about the initial pitch, and that's it. Now, this is pure speculation on my part, but I suspect that the focus of that documentary was changed in the wake of Beau DeMayo exiting or being kicked off of the series, because it's really a lose-lose for Disney when you look at how they approach something like a making-of documentary. If you go into the storylines and talk to the writers and go into the plot, and Beau DeMayo is not there, then he's conspicuous in his absence. But if you do the same thing and Beau DeMayo is there, then he's conspicuous in his presence. There's no way really to avoid it if you start getting into the creative nitty-gritty of the series. So it seems like, to me, and again, this is just my opinion, that Disney decided to sidestep that conversation by shifting the focus almost entirely away from the production of the series to focus on the legacy and the cast, which made it a fun watch, but I was actually somewhat disappointed as a fan of the show because I did want to know more about the writing and the decisions behind all of the different storylines and what it was like to make the season on the air, and that's just not what the documentary gave us. Now, because X-Men 97 has been so well received, there have been public calls to reinstate Beau DeMayo to X-Men 97, or some saying even put him in charge of the live-action movie. And I get that people love the animated show. I love the animated show. I'm literally wearing the t-shirt right now, but I would hope that one of the lessons that we've learned and that the industry has learned over the past several years is that you can't always let entertainment take priority over people's actual lives. If, and this is a speculative if, the rumors are true about Beau DeMayo being difficult to work with, then it's hard for me to get behind saying, well, you should subject people again to a potentially toxic work environment. I spent a lot of years working in various aspects of the entertainment industry, post-production, reality TV, you name it. I've probably done a little bit of work in it, and I worked in a lot of really, really good atmospheres, and I worked in a couple of bad ones. And I can tell you that working in a bad atmosphere does take a personal toll. And so to say that people should be subjected to that just for the sake of a show being good is disrespectful on a couple of levels. I think it's disrespectful of, the real lives of the people that work on the show, but also of the fact that, no one person is responsible for every single aspect of a show. Bo DeMeo did great work, and as a showrunner, he obviously executed a really good vision. He was credited as the writer on a lot of those episodes, but there were some other great writers that were on staff. There were a lot of great animators and directors and people that were working very, very hard and very, very passionately on the show that will continue to work on the show. So I really think that X-Men 97 and really just about every show, it's bigger than just one person, or at least people should allow it to have the potential to be. Now, I'm sure eventually some version of the truth will come out. Maybe it's a little bit more delayed than usual, but I think that we're going to find out some idea or some version of what happened. If it turns out that it wasn't a great work environment, then, that's what it is. If it turns out that it was something minor or it was a completely different reason that would make people comfortable working with Bo DeMeo again, then I think that he's got the resume to go out there and keep making great work. But this idea that you should just reinstate somebody because the thing that they worked on turned out to be good, I just can't get behind that, not without knowing more. And who knows who's entitled at this point to know more? We certainly aren't. Regardless of what happens in the future, I think right now the X-Men franchise is in a stronger position than it's been in several years, maybe going back to the sort of 1-2 punch of X-Men Days of Future Past in 2014 and Deadpool in 2016 before X-Men Apocalypse kind of derailed everything again. The X-Men franchise has always had an issue with consistency. I mean, X2 was a great movie. Logan was a great movie. Deadpool was a great movie. Days of Future Past was good. X-Men First Class was good. And yet it seems like they can't really string together 1 or 2 projects that are well received before delivering a real stinker. Well, now we've got a really well received show in X-Men 97, and should Deadpool and Wolverine be well received, then I think that is only going to enhance interest in the X-Men. And then, of course, if a second season of X-Men 97 comes out and is equally as well received as this first one, then I think that the X-Men are really primed for an audience that is ready to see them enter the MCU. Of course, there's always going to be an audience there that would be excited for that. But if you can get those characters to a place where people are just really, really anxious to see them on screen, then I think that we could see Disney and Marvel returning to those box office heights that we've seen before, and hopefully, the creative ones as well. I'm super excited, of course, with X-Men 97. I am anxious to see Deadpool and Wolverine. But the other thing that you have to remember is that there are a lot of ifs and buts and maybes and we don't knows between now and the X-Men being introduced into the MCU. And if there's one thing that the X-Men franchise has taught us over the several decades that it's been around, it's that evolution and mutation can happen very quickly. So what do you think? What do you think of the future of the X-Men franchise? Do you think that we are headed toward a new summit? Let me know down in the comments below. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor for this video, The Perfect Jean. We all like to be comfortable, especially during the summer, but let's be honest, it's a small step from wearing sweatpants around the house to rocking your pajamas in public. But now you don't have to choose between comfort and style with The Perfect Jean. These aren't just another pair of your stiff cardboard jeans. They're great looking, perfect fitting jeans that are stretchy as a kangaroo's pouch and hug your assets in all the right places. With 6 fits from skinny to thick, waist sizes from 26 to 50, and lengths from 26 to 38, they've got the perfect size for you. I'm not known as the most stylish guy to begin with, and I've always had trouble finding jeans that fit. They're either too short or too tight in places you don't want your jeans to be too tight, unless you're like a 70s rock star. But The Perfect Jean is a great name because they fit me perfectly. They're comfortable and stretchy, and they have huge pockets that don't look bulky. It's finally time to stop crushing the baby makers in uncomfortable jeans by going to theperfectjean.nyc. Fans of the show get 15% off your first order plus free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges when you use code DAN15 at checkout. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectjean.nyc with promo code DAN15. After you purchase, they're gonna ask where you heard about them, so please support the show and tell them that Dan sent you. F your khakis and get The Perfect Jean. Thanks to The Perfect Jean for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching. Be sure to stay tuned right here to the channel. I will have a review either tonight or tomorrow morning for Furiosa, a big Memorial Day release. And then, of course, I will be covering the box office and everything leading up to Deadpool and Wolverine's release in July and beyond. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.